So we just got the Final Fantasy Tactics collaboration, and with it, we get Mr. Moneymaker Hype Train himself, Orlandu. Let's break down why there's so much hype around Orlandu and talk about whether or not you should pull on the hatchet for him. First, let's look at the numbers that Cid has. Let's start by looking at Cid's attack stats, and as we can see when we compare him to a top DPS character like Stern, you can see that Cid has a good amount of attack, but not quite the level of Stern, and he's missing a bit of speed in comparison. But Cid does have a significant amount of HP, which means that he'll be more able to take hits while dishing out a good amount of damage himself. Also, you can see that Cid has the same passive that Stern has, which increases his attack a good amount. This is probably a very unfair comparison, mainly because we can see just by looking at the numbers that Cid isn't cracked out to be a pure damage dealer just like Stern is. However, unlike Stern, we can see that he is built to be more sustainable. Alright, so if Cid's numbers aren't matching up with a DPS focused character like Stern, what happens if we compare him and look to something more tanky? We're going to use Eld and Mont as examples here. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that name right. I think we'll just stick to Old in case that I mess up here. So Old and Mont. I picked Old as a comparison for Cid mainly because if you look at the numbers, they're pretty close. There's only small little differences between the two. And Old also has the Samurai subclass, which means that he can also equip that same passive that Cid has that gives him an increase in attack and also evasion. And I also included Mont into this visual because despite being an MR tier, he has one of the highest HP, which illustrates just how good Cid's HP stat actually is. Also, as many of you guys have seen in Arena, that Knight passive called Sword Guard is very useful when it activates. Both Cid and Ramza have this reactive ability. So what am I getting at here? Am I saying that Cid is just as good as Old, worse than Stern, and a little better than Mont? No, not at all! All the comparisons so far were to illustrate that Cid seems to have a good balance of everything from raw stats to the combination of passives that he shares with Stern, Old, and Mont. So to sum it up, it's like he got all the good traits from these characters. Solid stats and great passives and reactives. However, what really makes Cid a powerhouse is his unique job class called the Sword Saint. So here are his Sword Saint skills. The skills in green on the left are his main skills and the ones in blue on the right are his sub skills. His first skill is his only non-attacking skill. It's a buff that also gives him resistance to blind paralysis and sleep. Then he has two ranged break skills, which just seems as broken as they were in the Final Fantasy Tactics game. If I'm not mistaken, the defense break skill applies the defense down before calculating the damage, which if it does, it'll actually do more than the small damage that's in the description. As if range break skills weren't enough, Divine Ruination can hit 4 targets in a straight line while also applying a Thunder Imperil. And lastly you have Shadow Blade, which is just a skill that makes Cid even more tanky and more sustainable. It heals him for whatever damage he deals using the skill. It's a great skill. I mean, who needs a healer if Cid can just heal himself back to full HP? Orlandu also has a limit break, but I didn't include into the slide mainly because it's one of those things kind of like every other limit break in the game with the exception of characters like Medina, where if you could get the limit break to go off, it's great, but you're not kind of relying on it as much, mainly because it's too difficult to achieve that much AP versus using some of these other skills that we're talking about here. Then you have the passives there. Of the passives that the Sword Saint has, you'll probably be using Thunder God the most. Auto Refresh is useful, but I don't think you'll be using it as often over the other options. War Sense also pretty useful depending on some maps. You know, the extra jump could be helpful, but we'll talk more about that in the next slide because we'll be talking about the different ways to build Cid. So this slide pretty much sums up what makes Cid so good. As we mentioned earlier, he has very well-rounded stats and has a great set of skills which makes him very versatile. And because of that, he could be built many different ways. He can be built as a damage dealer that can evade for survival, or you can mix and match in some HP passives to make Cid more bulky, like the examples on the right. or just make him really beefy by giving him 2 HP increasing passives. Therefore, this combination of being a sustainable damage dealer paired with a range Sword Saint skills that can debuff opponents and even heal himself makes him a top tier character. So the big question is, should you pull? And as of before the update, I had this whole spiel on how I was going to recommend not pulling or rolling on this banner for most people, since collab heroes are very expensive. I was going to mention how building one Orlandu is like building 2 ultra rares, and we've got some good meta ultra rares coming out in about a week or in about a month or so. But go figure, about an hour ago, the update finished and 2 things happened. Orlandu got his own banner, and his shards are the same as normal characters. That's right, he is not as expensive as we initially thought for a collab hero, and him getting his own banner increases the chances of getting him. But again, RNG will be RNG, so if you don't want to risk anything, just save and wait. If you happen to have some extra Visor laying around, and you like Orlandu because he's a Final Fantasy Tactics character, or if you like that he's a very useful character for competitive play, then try a roll, see if you get him. But just don't get carried away, and be aware that it's still going to cost a lot of Visor to max limit break him. But in the event that you can't get him, or you can't fully max limit break him, maybe we'll get a rerun real soon. You never know, who knows. Or you could just wait and see if you happen to pull him through the 10 times daily summon. Alright guys, thanks for checking the video out, good luck with your summons, and until next time, Pizza Novice out.